All right.
Well,
And hello, here we are with another issue of Tom Ryan Remembers. This is after a 2 year hiatus, and we did one episode last week. And now we're going on to another episode to kind of cover things that deal with reading. And reading's been a very big part of Tom's life, everybody in the family, actually. But he was and would explore the roots of Tom's reading. And so that is the episode. And we'll start off with a very, very general question today, Tom. Uh, why do you read books?
I think we have to go back uh, about 92 years. That's how old I am. And my father and mother were both readers, but they didn't have the education that I was lucky enough to get. She, my father, went to a high school on a horse and was close to his dairy farm in Lake County, Illinois. And my mother also lived on a dairy farm in Lake County, Illinois, about 15 miles from Waukegan, the big city. And she would take a horse and buggy the whole 15 miles. And then took the horse to her aunt's house, was near the high school, and had to unharness the horse and change clothes so she didn't smell of the farm. The kids would hold their nose and groan if she did. And then she went the 4 blocks to the high school. And she did that every day, went through 4 years of high school. And when she graduated, she took a test. And if she got a high enough score, she would get a certificate that said she could teach school. She'd be a school teacher at 18 years old. And that's what she did. And so then she went out to a farm school, a school near farmers, and she would board at the farmer's home, and he'd get a discount on his taxes for boarding her and feeding her. And and she didn't get very much in money pay at all, but she insisted that whatever she did get was just a few dollars. It was hers to keep. And the tradition in those days was that when children went out and worked outside the home and got paid, they would turn the money over to their father, who would then decide how the money was going to be spent for the good of what was best for the whole family. Mm-hmm. Because the other children were working on the farm without pay, and she refused to turn over her small paycheck, and so she was on her way to getting more education and reading and so on. But
so wait, I do have a question here. So she finished high school, and did she get any training before she started teaching? Did she do any teacher training? Any teacher training?
Did she do any teacher training?
No teacher training at all. After she taught a year, she went over to DeKalb, Illinois, where they had a teacher's college, and she spent one summer there. And she didn't really like teaching. She met my father at the farmhouse. He was friends with the boys at the farmhouse, and she was introduced to him, and they soon got married. And when a teacher got married, they couldn't teach anymore. So she was out of a job, but she got another one as a clerk in the court. But how about reading? They were both readers, especially my father. He only went 2 years to high school. One of the courses he took was Latin. He liked Latin because he was an altar boy at St. Patrick's Church. And they had to say the Mass in Latin, and the priest said most of the Latin words, and he had to respond, and he had to memorize all that, and he was proud of that. And he went on to read books instead of going on to the Waukegan High School where my mother went. he just took the 2 years at Warren Township High School, and right near his home. But he started reading, and he would get books from the library. Like he'd go to the Carnegie Library when he was older, and that was almost towns had one of those.
I think you have to explain what is a Carnegie Library. I don't, most people don't know what they are.
Well, the Carnegie Steel man that owned the Carnegie Steel, he saw the need for libraries and gave a large sum of money to support libraries all around the country. And so many towns had an old fashioned building that they called the library, the town library. He would go there and get maybe 4 books at a time and bring them home, and then he would read them. And if he didn't get finished reading all 4, he would call the library on the phone and ask if he could have, if the books weren't, there wasn't somebody waiting for it, could he keep it for another 2 weeks? And then he would eventually read them all, bring them back, get 4 more. And he did that probably all of his life. The books he read, his best author was Zane Grey. Zane Grey is one of our America's best authors, but he loved cowboy westerns, adventure stories. It was mostly for entertainment, but it improved his reading, and he would he became, because he read all those books. I tried to get him to read like John Steinbeck, and he read a bunch of John Steinbeck short stories, and he said they were kind of dirty. He had kind of dirty parts in them, so he didn't go for John Steinbeck. But anyway, I thought John Steinbeck was wonderful. I was introduced to him in college, especially The Grapes of Wrath, my favorite book. But my father did crossword puzzles too. He loved words, and he was proud that he could do the crossword puzzle every day in the newspaper. And then we had the supermarkets came in about the time I went to high school. It was after World War II. The little corner store was being put out of business by the supermarket. And the supermarkets had cash and carry, no credit, and they had a more choice and lower prices. And so people were flocking to the supermarket. And in order to hold those customers from going to the corner grocery store that was very few choices and high prices, but did offer credit, you paid off your bill on payday. And so my folks went to the supermarket, and the supermarket was selling volumes of encyclopedia, Collier's Encyclopedia it was called. It was a cheap version of the Britannica, and a very cheap version, and they would sell a volume each week. And so if you shop there, you could just go on with your groceries. You could buy a volume of the encyclopedia. Well, eventually they got the whole A to Z encyclopedia, and it was in the bookcase right next to Dad's chair where he read. And we'd give arguments and discussions on many subjects in between reading. And if there was he'd always look for an answer in the encyclopedia if he could. And he'd pull it off the rack and look it up. And he'd say, no, it's this city or that city. And he could eliminate the discussion's argument. And really, it was the beginning of research for me. And when I was just a kid, he would do that. So he was a good example of how you become a good reader.
Well, I noticed that you also, when we were kids, you also bought a set of encyclopedias, and those encyclopedias sorry, were very expensive. They were about the same price as a car, an automobile. And
Yes.
so it was really, really expensive. So you did have them there, and they were a good example, but you put them on a shelf way high up. And I think that was probably so that we didn't get jelly on them or mess them up because we were little
Right.
kids at the time. But still, it was always up there for, to check out. And if you were there, then, you'd pull down a thing and say, look it up. And so that was
Yeah, that was the
oftentimes.
word. Look it up if you can. That settles instead of going tis state, and arguing. Uh, Try to look it up. As crude as a encyclopedia was.
Now your father then, if he read 4 books every 2 weeks, that means that he read 100 books a year. That's a
Yeah, I
lot of
think
books.
so. He really
Uh,
did. And
and mm,
they weren't the best literature by college standards, but he improved his vocabulary and he enjoyed it. And he was a clerk at the post office and didn't get paid very much, but it was a secure job. And he got a lot of time off. They had long vacations paid. And then when he'd come home on a vacation and have 2 weeks off and he'd paint the house. We didn't go on a lot of trips or travel much. We couldn't afford it, but he could do a lot of the work around the house himself instead of hiring it done. And
mhm.
because he did get time off, but we did do some short trips. But it was World War II, and there was gas rationing, and so that limited our travel. That was a way of education as well.
Now you say that you were not a very good spelling, and spelling. You were not a very good speller. So let's
Not a very
pause.
good
Let's
speller.
pause here. Hello, we're returning back. We had a little technical misfunction. The first half there, you saw Tom without his hearing aids and how how that worked. And now we have the hearing aids installed and connected up so he can hear me much better. And we were talking before about your father reading 100 books a week. And he was reading a lot, and you said he did a lot of crossword puzzles. And I was wondering, is that how he was able to help you with your spelling?
Oh yes, I did not. I have a master's degree in social studies, but I did not get A's in English. Now my wife Barbara, she got A's in English, and she can do computers too, and I can't. So she's much younger, and she's much uh, more skilled with this modern electronics than I am. But I, with my father, would try to teach me how to spell, and I was a poor speller. And I'd come home from Immaculate Conception parochial school with a list of words I was supposed to learn how to spell. And so he would go over them with me. And I can still hear his voice saying, "Sound it out, Tom. Sound it out." I had no idea what he was talking about, to sound the word out. So he could spell so well, it was hard for him to understand why I could not. But I did improve, but I never got to, he was always a better speller than I
Now you've
was.
got spell check.
Now I have spell check. And when I write emails, of course, I have lots of words I can, they check my spelling for me.
It might be genetic because Julia is a very bad speller as well.
It must be inherited. I mean, just it's a skill that some people have or have easily and others don't. And I was not always a good speller.
But Julia can spell in 2 languages.
That's
Yes.
true.
That's
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
That's impressive. And makes a living doing it too, yes. So Julia and Henri, Kevin's daughters, live in Japan, and they can speak 2 languages fluently and write and read them too. So
Okay,
we're
so
a reading
let's,
family. I think our whole family reads a lot, and it all started with my father and then the spelling. That I don't know if he ever helped my spelling any. I never did learn the Latin, so I could be an altar boy, and that disappointed him greatly. I gave it a try, and I just didn't like the idea of getting up there on an altar and with a surplice on and holding candles and talking in Latin. It didn't appeal to me. But he would say he wished I did, like he did.
yes, and then what? Then they switched the mass away from Latin, but it was still there even when we were little kids, and we had Dominus Obispo et cum spiritu tuo, and we would make fun of that and talk about Nabisco cookies and things like that.
Yeah,
But yes, yeah, the Latin Mass was a big influence, I'm sure. And learning Latin was, the basics of many languages in the West. But
yes, which
let's
he would
move
always
on.
point out.
Let's move on. And I wanted to talk to you about going to college. And you had a question about how did you pay for college? Yeah. Probably one of the first in your family to go to college, right?
Well, that was I was lucky enough to go to college, and he had the same disability that I do, macular degeneration, for which there is no cure. And there wasn't. He died at 93, about 30 years ago. So he didn't ever have the advantage of modern hearing aids and visual helps that I have. So, but it's a difficult handicap. I read Philip Roth's
American Pastoral.
American Pastoral, and I did that about 5 years ago. And I said, that's the last book I can read. My eyes just don't line up with the letters, and I can't read anymore. So I discovered, though, talking books. And talking books are free from the Library of Congress, provided by the US government. They send out a tape recorder free, and then they mail the tapes to you free, and you can call them on the telephone and request books. And I had read to me thousands of pages of books. One recent one was the biography of Lyndon Johnson, and there's 4 volumes, and I read them all, 1,000 pages apiece, and then I had them read to me, and then there's supposed to be the 5th volume, and the author is in his 80s, and everybody's hoping that he'll write before he dies. He'll write the final volume.
So
I think one of the reasons he doesn't want to write it is his hero now, Lyndon Johnson, had to give up the presidency because of the Vietnam War, and he didn't finish with a winning of the Vietnam War.
and he doesn't want to write about it. Okay, yes. Has your taste in reading changed at all in the last few years? Do you read more nonfiction, or is there any type of reading that has changed recently, or what kind of books do you read these days besides Lyndon
There's a
Johnson?
new tape recorded books called Audible, and you can get that from the computer, and you have to pay for it, but Kevin paid for it as a gift to me so that I could read books on my hand calculator, cell phone, and it would read to me right through wirelessly into my hearing aids and somebody would read the books to me. And so I got a lot of modern books that Kevin recommended. I remember one, Charlie Wilson's War. And Charlie Wilson was behind the war and behind the scenes, and the public never really realized he was really involved in the Afghan war when the Russians were trying to conquer Afghanistan unsuccessfully. And he won the war. And but anyway, it was an exciting book, and it was true about he really did do that. So I got to read a lot of books off of.
That's a nice feature of Amazon. You can share your account, and so I've shared my account, and it has 300 audio books. No, it's close to 400. I also read about 100 books a year, and so it's and many of those are on Audible. And it's a great way to read and listen, and it's easy to do while you're doing something else, cooking or walking, and it's wonderful to do that. And so listening using Audible or tapes from your library system is
our library has a Audible books called Libby. The L on Libby is for library, international books or something. And they provide books free that way. And the library is determined to survive the change in with the computer. And in competition, they're doing a pretty good job. And they do have book groups. And they come with a book bag full of books to Barbara's book group. And each lady, and they're all women, and they live here at our senior village, and they each get a copy of the book, and they go home and read it, and then they come back and discuss the book, which is, discussing a book after you've read it with other people who see different things in the book is very helpful. I don't join them, but they heard about our Tom Ryan Remembers, and Barbara told them that some of the people here at our senior village would like to record some stories from their youth. And she said, well, Tom's son does the same thing with his grandfather. And so she told, and so some of them are going to tune in to see if they can listen to how we did it. And I think it's a great way to have memories of the past. And the books I've read through Audible and Libby and even talking books. I think I've exhausted talking books, and I sent the machine back, but the machine then will be given to someone else, and they can get started on it.
Well, great. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. And
all right, good.
We'll put that
been fun
together.
To do this. Thanks for doing it, Kevin.
We could do another one about, pick a book and then talk about that particular book, or do something else. And still, there's lots of open possibilities for future podcasts. But I'm going to stop the recording here, and take care, everyone.